adequate to be self-sustaining or to even come close to back. It's not even a tenth of what the cuts we're proposing to education this year. And we would like to see that at least $100 million in the state education fund going into next year, because next year we're going to be back in the same place with the same kinds of cuts happening to K-12 education. So that's one place that we're trying to make sure has at least $100 million in it. Also, the governor's proposed budget called for a reserve of 4%, so 4% of the general fund. Each percentage of that in our reserve is somewhere around $70 to $75 million. So every percentage we put into our reserves is about $75 million that's not going to services to the citizens of Colorado. I think everyone agrees that it's absolutely essential that we have reserves in place. I've talked to the governor about this, and he talks about, he has a very strong small business background, and from his perspective, he was saying that most businesses wouldn't even contemplate keeping their doors open with less than a 10 to 15% reserve in place. And here we are talking about upping our reserves to 4%. So that's a really tough place to look. I mean, if the wildfire season, I was looking at the statistics. The worst wildfire season we had, which was 2002, 2003, one of those years with the Hayman fire and all of that. They said in March of that year there were four significant wildfires in the month of March. This March we had 26 fires. So if that's any indication of what our fire season could potentially be, the state of Colorado is going to have to spend some money defending us from wildfires. So that's just one example of why it's important to have a reserve in place. Also in this, there's what's called the vendor fee, and those of you that run businesses probably know about the vendor fee. That's the money that the state of Colorado gives back to the business for collecting a sales tax. So as a business, you collect sales tax, you pass that sales tax on to the state. The state then returns the vendor fee, which has been 3.3% of the sales collected. This vendor fee was suspended a few years ago, and at this point it is being reinstated to the tune of 2.2%. So it will have about a 1% reduction over what it was before. This is going to be about $20 million. This 1% of the sales tax collected will end up being about $20 million that won't be available to go to K-12 education as well. So that's a piece of it as well. Also, there were some sales tax exemptions that were passed last year. One of those was the suspending the sales tax exemption for tobacco products. That will continue this year. That is equal to about $31 million into the general fund. And then again this year, the plan as part of this budget plan is to declare a fiscal emergency, which means that $33 million of the tobacco tax money, that's from Amendment 35 a few years ago, about $33 million in the tobacco taxes can go into the general fund as well. So those are some of the background numbers as we're looking to balance this budget this year. Again, like I told you, I think that there's still some places that we can find some more money to soften the blow to K-12 education. I just can't see us doing the $250 million cut this year. And so with that, that's a little background in the budget. There's, I mean, you've heard. Certainly, we had quite a debate over a bill that didn't even get out of the House committee, the House Judiciary Committee. This was the debate on civil unions, which has, by all accounts, is widely supported by the citizens of Colorado. It also has quite a bit of bipartisan support in both the Senate, that it passed through with bipartisan support, and also the House. The belief is that there's quite a bit of bipartisan support for passing civil unions. However, it died on a party line vote in the Judiciary Committee in the House, so we won't know if there is truly the bipartisan support in the House. So I happen to know that there is. So I'm hopeful that that's something that will come back and we can actually make sure that all citizens in Colorado are treated equally under the law. So with that, I definitely want to give time for people to ask questions, see what's on your mind, what ideas you want me to take back down to the Capitol, what ideas or questions. I have a listing of all of the bills that were presented. Not all have passed through. You might have heard that quite a few bills have been dying this year, which can be a good thing. And so I have a list of where all the bills are. So if you have bills by bill number, I can give you an update on those. But I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
How much does the federal government give us for education, K through 12, for performing CSAP?
For doing CSAP, so the federal.
Because isn't that a federal mandate? But they mandated it, but they don't pay for it.
Yeah.
So how much do we spend on that, and then how much do they give us? Or do they give us anything? Or do they renege on some of that for not doing CSAP, for instance?
So when CSAP actually was passed and became law before it was federally mandated, before the assessment was federally mandated through NCL, No Child Left Behind, back about 8 years ago. When CSAP first came in, 97, 98, they were looking at spending about $20 million a year, at least the first couple of years, to implement it and actually get it done. Of course, there might have been a few $1 million in matching grants from the feds at that point, but I'm not quite sure about that. One of the things that, one of the proposals that's been out there is, well, if we get rid of CSAP, that's money that we won't have to cut from K-12 education. The best numbers that I've heard is that the state of Colorado is spending about $6 million a year operating CSAP. I think that number is a little suspect, because yes, that might be at the end of the day, the state of Colorado might be writing a $6 million check to count CSAP, score CSAPs and count them and everything. But that doesn't take into account how much the local districts are spending as well. And I think the local districts probably surpass that original $20 million piece. The other problem with saying let's just suspend CSAP and we'll save all this money is that there is a lot of federal money tied in, but it's not necessarily going into CSAP. It's going into high need areas, it's going into at-risk funding, it's going into free and reduced lunch. And so our school districts and the state stand to lose many millions of dollars of federal aid if we were to just
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so
The
I don't
reason
know.
I ask is, as a parent, most schools do CSAC and assessment.
Mhm.
Assessment tells the teacher quickly how he or she needs to then change her curriculum, his or her curriculum, how to help the student. CSAP, they don't get results till the next year. Their class is gone. And so, it's an idea, maybe we can't get rid of CSAP for those reasons, and that's why I was curious how much federal funding we would lose. But to me, in a tight fiscal year, now is the time to start looking at the inequities of what we do. I mean, why are we hitting our heads against the wall with CSAP and spending all these millions of dollars when assessment is there?
Yep.
And if the federal government, in my opinion, needs to start looking at this. We do assessment, and the assessment numbers, as far as testing, coincide and correlate to CSAT. So we're doing testing twice.
Absolutely.
And one set of tests get to the teacher quickly, the other set doesn't. And quite frankly, as far as improvements in schools, and everybody wants feedback on the teachers, and it's flat. And it's been flat since 1969 when they started doing assessment. So, we need to look at a different way to look at our teachers, maybe a different way that we look at our school systems and assess them. But the reality of it is the testing that we do to our students since 1969, when we relate it to the rest of the world, has been flat. And I'm talking about not just Jeffco, I'm talking about nationwide.
And I'll say quick, I in general agree with pretty much everything you said there. So I agree with that. Part of my job at Jeffco is to help implement these assessments, many of which, you're absolutely right, are much more focused on exactly what those students are learning right then. The results are much quicker. One of the good news pieces I can bring to you is that CSAP is going away. Even if nothing else, the name CSAP is going away over the next couple of years. And Jeffco Schools has actually been very much in the forefront of this. But in the last, 3 years ago, we passed Senate Bill 212, which said that the state of Colorado, Colorado Department of Education had to look at standards across the state and then basically rewrite the standards looking forward to the 21st century, because our standards haven't been updated in 15 years. Using those updated 21st century standards, and as well as with what looks like the rewrite of the No Child Left Behind at the federal level, actually it will be this Wednesday, the state school board let me step back. A couple of months ago, the state school board adopted the new standards and also adopted a new assessment plan. As part of this assessment plan, and being a social studies teacher, a piece that I actually support of expanding assessment is including social studies in these assessments, reading, writing, math, science, and including social studies as well. But the new plan that they're adopting says that the results have to come back much more quickly. They have to be focused on the new standards, which I believe are a big improvement over our. I don't think they're perfect, but I think they're an improvement. And that our new assessment system has to address a lot of the concerns that you said about CSAP. So we'll be implementing this new assessment system over the course of the next few years. I believe 2014 is kind of our target of having all students on the new system. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's moving in the right direction. That we won't have so much overlap between what teachers in the classroom are doing to assess their kids on a day-to-day basis, and it's March again. We have to CSAP the kids. They all have to take a week of tests, which the results won't even be back until the fall. The timeline moves up. It's much more focused on thinking and creativity than it is on rote memorization. So.
And then another thing is, I think that, passing bill bonds, especially with folks who don't have children anymore and never did